Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another Silicon Labs Technology Show. And yes, you're right, this is another Hijack episode. We have stolen the show away from Kyle one more time, and you might be asking why. Well, the reason that we're doing it this time is because I managed to convince an old acquaintance of mine to come and join me on a podcast. Phil, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, it has been a long time, but let's tell the listeners why we're an acquaintance. Phil and I actually used to work together in a small little company called Integration Associates. I don't know, 15 years ago, I would guess would be the right kind of time frame. The company was focused on sub-gigahertz radio and 15.4 type radios, and we both got acquired by a rather large company based out in Austin called Silicon Labs. Now, both of us went away a little time after that to go and do some other things, but we both ended up coming back into the Silicon Labs family. Myself directly, of course, and Phil as one of our alliances. But before we get into that, Phil, why don't you tell us what you did actually get up to?
Yes, will do. So at the time we were acquired, I was working, as you said, on sub-gigahertz radio for Zigbee type products. And part of the work I was doing related to standards. And I was offered the opportunity to go and work with Pacific Gas and Electric on developing a new standard within IEEE 802.15.4G. And also at the same time, I was doing some work with Wi-Fi Alliance in their smart grid task group and also with low power Wi-Fi. So I worked on that for a little while. Once the standard was developed, we were looking at what we could do with it.
So where did you end up taking that? I mean, you obviously developed a standard that was very focused on meter reading, I'm assuming, and you progressed beyond that into certain market segments. Would that be a fair statement to say?
That is, I think it's fair to say that the utility industry has been leading the way for quite a few years in terms of machine-to-machine communication, particularly smart meters. Started with meter reading and then developed into advanced meter infrastructure, which is part of the smart grid, which gives you more control over the way the grid behaves. And that really was the beginning of the smart city revolution. And as you're probably aware, electricity metering particularly has become integrated into smart cities, and that's just grown into things like street lighting and other application areas.
And that's a very fair statement, because when you think of smart cities, it's actually a lot more applications than many people think of. You mentioned lighting, you mentioned meters, but is there other areas that those in the thought leadership aspect are moving into over time, do you think?
Oh, I think so. I think, and it's a slow evolutionary process because we're we're not entirely sure what all those application areas might be. But once you have a good communications infrastructure, you can start looking at expanding that. So initially, we look at things like street lighting because it's very easy to justify the business case for a city to incorporate technology into their street lights. And then once they've got that, they can do things like trash management, parking, intelligent transportation. There's a whole load of different applications that can be used there.
Okay, so I understand why a lot of the smart city aspect is a growth market, but I don't think arguably smart cities is necessarily a new thing. Cities have used communications for many, many years. You know, whether it be irrigation down at the park, whether it be connection of their buses back to a central hub. But I think what you're doing is a little bit different because you're actually introducing standards at this point. Would that be fair?
That's correct, yeah. What you described, as you say, cities have been targeting technology at particular applications, but often those applications are developed in a silo. So there is a proprietary technology that can be used, as you say, for things like managing buses or parking or whatever, but you can't integrate that with other applications and then take full advantage of it. So this is where standardization really comes into its own. The work I've been doing involves standardization of the communications layer, which talks about how you can interconnect lots of products with good reliability and good security.
Okay, so in a very far-fetched way of thinking this is you could actually have one application now due to its standards approach, but one application actually influencing things on another application. As an example, a weather sensor at the airport through the city network actually controlling the irrigation system at the local park.
That is entirely feasible. And the sorts of applications people are looking at or cities are looking at right now will involve things like automated street light control. You can have occupancy sensors or traffic sensors that allow you to reduce the lighting levels when there are no cars on the road. Traffic management integrated with emergency vehicles as well, so that you can actually clear a route for an ambulance to go past. Traditionally, those would be, siloed applications. But if you have consistent communications technology and well-described applications, then you can start looking at integrating these apps together.
So what is this new standard called, and when did it start? What's some of the background on that then?
Well, so we developed the underlying communication standard, which was called IEEE 802.15.4G. And when that was completed and released as a standard, some of the stakeholders involved looked at how we could take this out and really create interoperable products. And as a result of that, in 2012, an organization called YSUN Alliance was formed. Initially, that was 8 founding member companies, and that has since grown to over 300 companies with a large number of product vendors and certified products. And my role in all of this has been, well, I'm now president and CEO of the organization.
So where is the organization operating? Is it based locally to you? Is it around the world? What countries are involved in this today?
So it's a global organization. In the early days, it was primarily focused on North America and Japan. Japan came about because of the needs of the utility industry. After Fukushima, Japan went from energy surplus to energy deficit, and there was an urgent requirement to look at standardization and technology to help reduce energy consumption. And YSUN was very active in bringing that about. So as a result, there are something like around 65 million meters, smart meters in Japan that incorporate YSUN technology. Also, I mentioned North America. We had early deployments of YSUN compatible technology, both in the San Francisco Bay Area for their smart meter rollout, and also in Florida, in Miami. Miami is an interesting case because they installed 4 million smart meters initially, and then Florida Power and Light is also responsible for the street lighting. And later on, they integrated something like 500,000 street lights into the same network. And that technology is all based on the 802.15.4G standard.
One of the other questions I think could be of interest to a lot of people is how does this benefit the city planners? How do standards play into those that manage cities? Of course, we're technologists, we've been in this space for a long time, so we have good understanding of that ourselves. But what are the things that those guys should really come to understand with reference to standards-based protocols over their previous proprietary type of products?
Well, I think one of the great benefits of standards is the number of people that have worked on developing this technology and the scrutiny it's received to the point where it just works. So if you're a city planner, you don't want to have to understand all the technology behind things. You just want to know that what you're buying is going to work and that you have a continuity of supply. I think one of the things that's happened recently is this traditional market that used to be called M2M, machine to machine, has now become the Internet of Things. And just to clarify that, this means using internet type protocols to connect smart objects together. And this brings, again, the benefits that you have all of the protocols developed by the internet community, which bring great connectivity, huge scalability, but also bring very robust security protocols as well.
One of the things that you just pointed out is the fact that it's actually internet based, or at least it drops into internet. I think it's IPv6 that Wyson is based on, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct, yeah.
One of the benefits of that, of course, is that cities have internet infrastructures in place. So a city does not have to go to the expense of rolling out an infrastructure for this protocol. Would that be fair?
That is correct. And that infrastructure is relevant for both within the municipality offices and also out in the field as well. Now, I'd like to predict a question people might have, which is concerning security here. So it could be considered that because devices are connected to the internet, they're insecure, but that's not necessarily the case. And one of the benefits that YSUM brings is a particularly robust type of security where every device on the network has its own identification built into it that's normally built in at manufacturing. And when a device joins the network, it is authenticated against the utility or the municipality back office system. So you know, as a city planner, you know that every device sitting on your network should be there and is very difficult to hack and to intrude onto the network.
I think that's actually a very fair statement because the individual's quite happy to do their own personal banking. They're happy to do their own taxes on the internet, and by the fact there are so many companies involved, there is actually a lot more testing done around security than on any proprietary network, which is formed by half a dozen people in a much smaller company.
Yep, that's correct. To get an idea of the scale of this, there are several thousand skilled security engineers that analyze the protocols. One of the other benefits is that because we're using IPv6, there are more recently, there have become lots of artificial intelligence tools that can be used on the network to do things like intrusion detection or look for communication anomalies. So this means that every single device on your network, you've got 4 million devices out there, can be analyzed to be secure.
And I have to admit, we have a couple of other podcasts on artificial intelligence, but there's a couple of other benefits that come from that. Artificial intelligence has, at the edge node, has the ability to reduce bandwidth by making a lot more better decisions in devices that are typically under-resourced from a memory standpoint, from a processing standpoint, and from a battery point of view. So now you're not transmitting as much data because you're actually using the bandwidth better. So you've got, to your point, intrusion detection, but you've also got better network optimization as well through such technologies being applied.
That's true. There are several utility type applications that really benefit from the ability to deploy intelligence to the edge. So things like outage management, where maybe you get a power failure on a small part of the grid, which under centralized communication systems would be invisible. You wouldn't know quite where the problem was. When you can deploy edge type intelligence and then have a mesh communications network that provide resilience and fault tolerance on the routing protocols, then you have much more granular control and visibility onto that network.
And I know that you've been working with a number of folks here at Silicon Labs on some of the solutions that we're releasing, and I think customers are going to see more and more of that in the very, very near future, from development tools, from enhanced software, enhanced hardware, and so forth. So I actually see that there might be a reason to get you back in the next couple of weeks, just to talk about some of the things that we're releasing, and maybe even get some of those product folks on the chat here with us as well, so that we can actually look at some of the solutions that are now Wi-Sun powered. Would you be open for that in the future?
Oh, most certainly, yes.
Okay, well, if that's the case, let's wrap it up for today. Let's have you back in a few weeks' time, where we'll take care of some of these other questions. To our listeners out there, we look forward to seeing you on that occasion. And Phil, thanks for coming today.
Thank you.